Twice, and then the second time.
Right.
So it's twice through it.
Okay. Let's start with that.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Good morning. God's peace be with all of you. Let's start with a word of prayer. Lord God, Heavenly Father, on this the second Sunday after Christmas, we ask that you continue to enlighten us with your true wisdom that is ours through your Son, Jesus Christ, in whose name we pray. Amen. So just before we begin, just a couple of chuckles for us as far as we're looking at vestments and clergy wear, things that your pastor wears, and we'll start from the clerical shirts all the way up or out, or the outer layers, or whatever those are. But first is sort of a funny thing. We have some examples of maybe not great vestments. If you just do a Google search for bad vestments, you get all kinds of crazy things. This is obviously one that, like, why have one cross when you can have a lot?
That looks like you wearing that.
We have, I don't know. I think it's supposed to be like a sun sort of. I don't know. That. Legos, I guess.
Is there a website? Hope he's not walking on the target range.
Yeah. It clicks right, send it. That's actually was the presiding bishop in the ELCA. There's this one. No one takes this pastor seriously, especially Sarah, who made the stole. Sarah laughed. And there is actually an entire site of, it's actually called Bad Vestments. I don't see it now, but
Like the Walmart.
oh yeah, Bad Vestments blog. Checking ahead of time. Nevertheless, all right, so bad things. Let's get into examples of things that are good and lovely instead. So we're going to look at, you've got a handout. The handout is roughly what I have here. And then also the back of the handout is a collection from a chapter from a book called What Every Altar Guild Should Know, or What an Altar Guild Should Know by Paul H.D. Lang. He was 50s and 60s liturgy expert of sorts within the Missouri Synod. So helpful thing for us there. But as far as like what do we wear, where do we start with what we wear, and like a lot of things that I always talk about in the church, with respect to worship, is in everything we must first and foremost be reverent, and the second thing, we should be courteous. If we keep those two things in mind, we go a long way in how we conduct the service in a way that doesn't distract or detract from the things of God being delivered there, but rather keep them focused on Him. When we're being reverent, we're keeping God's presence in mind. And when we are being courteous, we are keeping our neighbor's presence in mind. And whenever we're faced with a situation that goes sideways, we think to ourselves, what's a reverent and courteous way to deal with this? And you just do your best. And then when it's happening around you, when somebody else is trying to deal with something that has gone sideways as far as reverence or courtesy, you give them charity that says, all right, they're doing their best, or is there a way that I can help and be courteous? With our vestments, all the way back in the Old Testament, in Exodus 28, God is giving the directions and the explanations for what the priests of Israel are supposed to wear while they're conducting the service in the temple. And sort of the refrain around the theme of those vestments is that they're designed for glory to God and for beauty. So they should point toward something, attribute of God, or something about God being in our presence in that, and they should be beautiful. Which is why some of those other bad vestments there, we find those objectionable, because they're not beautiful. They're terrible. That same guy was commenting, the guy who wrote the blog post, was commenting on the vestments for the Notre Dame reopening. And they were sort of crosses, but they were sort of like triangular colored pieces sort of swirling out or something like that. And it's like somebody got a cricket and some pressed vinyl and kind of went to town on those. It was just not befitting the grandeur of the building that they were being used in. It's like tuxedos with a brown shoe. It just doesn't. So for glory and for beauty. Now, but keep in mind though, that is for the priests of Israel. And the things of the Old Testament that related to the priests in the New Testament are applied to whom? Wrong, not pastors. To the people of God, the royal priesthood of God. So you are bedecked in the glorious things of God for his glory and for beauty, in that you have the white robe of Christ's righteousness, you are beautiful in his sight. He has given himself up for you to wash you in his own blood, that you might be presented without spot or wrinkle or blemish or any such thing, Ephesians 5. And those things are applied to you. Your clergy, we are not priests in our service to the church, though we are priests as part of the priesthood of all believers. And I'll talk about the distinction between priest and pastor in just a moment. So the vestments of the New Testament are not prescribed like they were for the Old Testament. However, should we perhaps keep in mind what God had in mind, and that these things should be mindful of whose presence they are in, and that they should exemplify the beauty and the grandeur of the gifts that we are delivering? I think they should. So, very specific. The New Testament doesn't have those. So, pastors versus priests. Priests offer sacrifices. That's what the Old Testament was about. They offer sacrifices. But in the New Testament, St. Paul says we offer ourselves as living sacrifices. The ones offering sacrifices in the New Testament, under the New Covenant, are the people of God. That we offer ourselves as living sacrifices, our offerings, our gifts, our time and talents, those sorts of things. Those are the sacrifices that we offer, not because they atone for sin, because Christ is the sacrifice who has atoned for sin, but because they're out of thanksgiving for what Christ has given us. Pastors, on the other hand, shepherd God's people. Jesus said to St. Peter on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, tend my sheep, feed my lambs. That's why we use the word pastor for clergy in particular, in the Lutheran Church at least, to draw that distinction. We don't offer sacrifices. What I'm doing at the altar there is not a sacrifice. We are offering a sacrifice of thanksgiving and praise all together as the priesthood of all believers. But we are being shepherded by pastors. So in general, our clergy garb, what we wear is, a clerical shirt and a collar, and another sort of, and then above that we go into like either a cassock and surplice or an alb. We wear a stole, and then things you may not have heard of or maybe only seen in some places would be something like a chasuble. Another item would be a cope. And then something that's really particularly rare would be what's called a dalmatic and a tunicle, or a tunic. We'll talk about what those are in a minute. But the clerical collar was just descended from plain everyday clothing, which actually came first as the cassock. The cassock was the long black garment that people, that was just what folks wore. We're talking medieval times, and Reformation times and things. And so when you have a cassock, it's and you'll be surprised at how much of our daily wear today is descended from this. little hint, you put it on backwards. Charm to it. These are supposed to be. I haven't worn this in a long time, so pardon me if I can. That guy in a little cassock. I've had this cassock since I was in seminary, so that was 80 pounds ago. But yeah, so then you would button it up. It would button up like this. So this would be, classic. This is, and you see this sometimes in old movies and stuff like that. And then there's, I know this doesn't fit. You have a belt.
Do they wear those for funerals?
So this is an undergarment. This would be like everyday wear. Yeah, that's definitely not going to fit. And there's the belt. I have a better picture of it later on. But this would just be like going around town kind of wear. You see like British movies and stuff like that. The vicar of Diddley and stuff like that. He's wearing a cassock. He runs around in a cassock. So, but I'll tell you what. This is what they wore. But this is very inconvenient. So what should we do? I'll tell you what. Instead of it being one piece that's really long, let's make it 2 pieces. And let's close the legs into, pants and a button-up shirt. Comes from this. All right? And then you get, and then the top part, maybe you lose a few buttons over time and things like that, and the styles change and things like that. And instead of it being buttoned all the way up to the top, you kind of fold the sides down and things. But underneath all of that is still a cassock. So I take the cassock and you fold it down. Now you get your suit coat. And you kind of fold it out. It's like, 2 buttons. And you get multiple buttons. That's sort of a stylish thing. That's where it's descended from. The church, being the church, says, well, we'll do things old to set them apart from being things new. So that's why we still wear cassocks sometimes like that. So, all right. So that's where the cassock would come from the suit jacket and things like that. And then with that, over time, into the 1800s, you get into starched white shirts, and then removable collars was very popular in 1800s, because those were easy to clean and things like that. And so you'll sometimes see pastors wear collars like this. Well, that was just of the time. You might have a tab, you might have like wings on this, and then you look at watch the movie Tombstone with Kurt Russell and stuff like that. They have collars like this. And when they're playing pool, they have this off, and it's just a band collar shirt. But they would have collar stays and stuff that would fit on this. And you put this underneath that jacket, and then you just get the little white tab there. Well, for convenience sake, instead of wearing the jacket and the cassock and then this over the top and things, let's just make the shirt black. And instead of having, a metal stay in the front and a metal stay in the back and all these sorts of things, I'll tell you what, let's just pull the collar down and let's make it really easy. That's all it is. That's where this all comes from. So it's really descended from cassock and circlet, from cassock to just the black shirt with the white collar. It's just kind of what it was. So when you go in reverse, you get the cassock with the white tab. When you go from the suit coat backwards, that's what you started with. So that's just how simple it is. Now, we need to be a little bit careful about allegory, which is assigning meaning to things that wasn't there originally. So something like the clergy outfit here is, this was off of Facebook recently, why the collar? Why did pastors wear collars? Here's some fun facts about the clerical collar facts. The clerical collar started as a Presbyterian invention. I wouldn't say so, no. Many forms of clerical garb have been used, but the Roman collar actually has its roots in Protestantism. I would really doubt that. It's just what people wore, and then just pastors kept wearing it, and the priests definitely wore it. The clerical collar symbolizes the office of the ministry, primarily because just nobody else dresses that way anymore. And I like to explain it as such. You know, if you are in trouble, you can go to the man dressed as a police officer to help. So too, if you're in spiritual trouble, go to the man who is in the collar. Now that is true. I mean, that is a way that the clerical collar functions and serves in this day. And that is absolutely true. It's a uniform. It's an identifier. This next part, though, like the black symbolizes sinfulness. The white collar symbolizes the pure gospel, which is preached out of the pastor's mouth. The alb, or surplice, represents the covering of sin, the black clerical garb by the grace of God. And the clerical collar fell out of use because there was stigma surrounding it, but that's not really true either. So this idea that, oh, it's black because of sin, and then it's white because our throats are proclaiming the word of God and stuff like that, no, it's just, that's not really how it goes. So just, it may be a way to understand it now, but that's not the meaning of it. That's not why those things were started. It's just the clothing that was normal for the day, and the clergy just retained it. So then over the top of, so those are like the everyday garments. Now, when we're doing the liturgy, when we're actually conducting the service, we would wear a white robe called an alb. And alb is just the Latin word for white. Like albino, white. White. So it's usually a white, close-fitting garment, and then we cinch it with a rope. And normally it would be all one piece, and you would pull it over the top, and you would have like a little thing that you would wrap around your neck to keep it from getting stained, and you would tie it around your waist, and then you would have a belt to tie it, to wrap around your waist there again. And it was wrinkly, it was hard to manage, and it was hard to put on and off and things like that. So over time, it got simplified into what we have is, sort of what you see me wear today is, oddly they call this a cassock alb, which is just, now you're just confusing things. But it's just an easier way to do it because it's open and then it just snaps closed. But the ultimate result is that you have a white, close-fitting garment with sleeves. And then we cinch it with a rope. And because you just can't call it a rope, because it's a church thing, we call it a cincture, because you cinch it. Cincture. But this really descends from just the Roman wear of, it's a toga. But that's just what the clergy would continue to wear even as fashion and style had moved on and things like that. So that's where the alb comes from. And then, so you got the alb, then you got the cassock. The surplice is just an alb that is designed to fit over, like if you're in medieval Europe and you're in a big drafty castle, church and stuff like that, and you want to stay warm, you're going to wear furs. And so to put something over the top of your furs, you would get an alb, but that was just really, really bushy. So you could fit a lot of fur under here. And you would stay warm. But it's still basically an alb. Okay? So you would wear a cassock underneath it. It's kind of what it would look like. So that's basically what we have there with it. The surplice is just a flowy alb to go over the furs to stay warm. It was cold. The stole, which has become more the direct mark of the clergy and the ordained, is just a scarf or a yoke of the office. Like you would yoke an oxen or something like that. You put it over you, and you're bound to this thing. Or honestly, it probably started off as just to stay warm. But again, it's not just a knitted thing. This is silk, and it's unfortunately 20 years old, and it's showing its wear. I need to replace it. But it's silk brocade and gold stitching and stuff like that. So the stole is uniquely identified for the ordained. Now, lay people who would be serving around the altar or helping with things could wear like an alb or a cassock and surplice, just again to for the glory of God and for beautiful things. And ultimately the clerical shirt, the vestments, and things like that aren't to draw attention to the person, but rather to just cover the person and to say, we're about what that person is delivering and proclaiming and the gifts they're giving, not the person themselves. Because that person could leave and you put another person in their place, they're dressed the same. It's like, oh, the same office is delivering those same gifts. So really these are meant to move away from individuality and more toward the consistency of, oh, the guy with the stole is the pastor. The guy in the dress on Sunday morning, they're leading worship. That kind of stuff. And it's not your everyday wear because it's set aside for doing the life of the worship and things. Now, you go back 50 years or 100 years, and you'd end up with like Geneva gowns, which would be like black academic gowns, which would be very common even among Lutherans during the age of rationalism, where the idea behind church was that by getting more knowledge and becoming more scholarly and more educated, that you were more faithful. And so it became more of an academic exercise than the delivering of sacramental gifts. And so the academic gown or the Geneva gown or preaching gown would be what they would wear. But that's actually more just descended from the cassock in a way as well. And to distinguish that person as being the preacher, they would wear what are called befkin, or preaching bands. These are my great-great-grandfathers. And so you would wear those, you would tie those up around your white clerical collar under the Geneva gown. And, there's all sorts of allegory with this too, like the law and the gospel or whatever, Old and New Testament, whatever it is. But, it's just, again, but it's like, you look at like what the Puritans would wear and things like that, just that age and stuff, it's kind of decoration. That's what it was. So.
But it was also uniform.
But it became uniform, and so that made it easily identifiable. And that's a helpful part of the clergy garb and the church vestments, is that it helps us identify who's there to do what responsibility. So the Geneva gown and the preaching bands. So here's just a few illustrations from this, very 1950s, 60s. Very. So there's the guy in the cassock, his belt fits. And then here's a Geneva gown with the preaching bands there. Here are so you got the liturgical vestments, and then you add to that the Eucharistic vestments for doing the Eucharist, the Lord's Supper. You get, you have the alb, the white garment, and then you have the stole, and you may have a chasuble, which goes over the top of that. We're going to talk about that specifically in a minute. Chasuble over the top, again, for the celebration of the Lord's Supper. And then also older vestments that we don't see much more of anymore would be like a maniple, which is just would be like a towel over this. It's meant to be like a waiter's towel. You think French restaurant kind of thing. And that's what we're doing as a pastor. We're waiting on the Lord's table. We're waiting on tables. There it is. And then the amice, which is up around the neck there. That was a collar designed to keep the alb clean. So they've certainly evolved. Vestments have certainly evolved considerably over time. All from the toga or tunic. This is what everyone wore, and as cultures evolved in fashion, the church retained them as specialized clothing of the clergy, just to be more readily identifiable, and it's just sort of what they did. So here's some examples of, these are from St. Paul confirmation photos. This congregation. So there he is wearing a Geneva gown and befkin, the preaching bands. You have Reverend Brandt in 1954 wearing a Geneva gown there on the top left. I mean, if he wasn't wearing if he was just wearing a suit, you couldn't hardly tell him from the confirmation kids there, actually. Anybody know the lady in the front center?
Marilyn Rawhouse.
That is.
Who is it?
It's Marilyn Rawhouse in the middle there. So, and then Pastor Sandman, after him, wore cassock and surplice, and this was a confirmation photo. He had taken the surplice off, so he's between services. He's wearing a cassock, and he's even got the belt. I mean, he's pretty sharp looking, right? He's got the whole, that is what a cassock is supposed to look like. He looks pretty sharp there. And then Pastor Buck is wearing a cassock and surplice and a stole. And as you move through the 40s and 50s, you're seeing a recovery of vestments, of wearing a stole again, wearing the cassock and surplice, wearing an olive, wearing the chasubles, and these sorts of things are being recovered in the Lutheran Church, in the Missouri Synod in particular. And I mean, they were part of the church originally, and it just sort of, because of rationalism and again that more academic knowledge focus, the vestments sort of fell out of favor, and now they were sort of recovered. Then you have Pastor Morawski. Over time, he started with cassock and surplice and stole, and then later on he's wearing an alb with the cincture and a broad stole, as opposed to I know that guy. Hang on. So this is more of what they would call a Gothic stole. It's more of a narrow strip. And then this is a broad stole, a wider, more just to be more pronounced as far as what color of the season it is there.
He's got the 3 crosses.
He has a large pectoral cross there. That's another thing that pastors can wear. That was typically, it used to be only reserved for bishops to wear a pectoral cross. But in a way, in our theology, we don't really have bishops that are like over all the pastors in an area. A pastor at a place is his own bishop because he's the one called to be the shepherd of those people. So he can wear it. So that's why I wear one. And then here's me wearing an olive and a broad stole and a pectoral cross, how things change over time. So we've gone from a black Geneva gown with preaching bands all the way through to sort of what we have familiar today. So it's hard to say, well, that's how we've always done it here. Well, what decade, what era?
What year?
175 years, things have changed a lot. So, Ethel?
You own your own, and does St. Paul own some?
Both. Yeah. I own a set, and then St. Paul has a set that is with the paraments that are on the altar and the pulpit and the lectern. Because they match well, I don't mind wearing my own. If they clash, I would wear the church ones that match everything. Traditionally, it had been that the congregation would own the paraments and the stoles and things, so everything matched. And then if you had a pastor come who, couldn't afford to have a full set of stoles on their own or something, then it's okay. The church has them outfitted, and you've got the things that match everything. So that makes sense. So I've had mine for my 20 years of ministry, and it's time to do something with them too. But nevertheless, and then this is me at my ordination, 2004, and I'm wearing in this photograph a chasuble, and that's the solid colored garment over my stole, which you can see peeking out underneath there, and like all the other guys are wearing as well. And even in this photograph, you see a variety of. I guess everybody's wearing an alb. No, the guy behind me is wearing a cassock and surplice. I got 2 cassock and surplice there. On vicarage, my vicarage supervisor was always like, we would wear the alb and the cincture, because he would wear a chasuble. For communion services and non-communion services, we would wear cassock and surplice. And he always wanted to make sure we matched. So I had to make sure I was wearing the same thing as him. So, but you don't have to always wear it. It's okay. I know, right? That young punk kid there. So a chasuble and that center garment there. This is like my preferred style with kind of a pointed yoke with like a cross and beads in the back and things. But there's a wide variety of things. To give you an example of one in person here, I have a couple examples. These are not my preferred styles. They're dated. Nevertheless, here's what they are. So this is a chasuble, and it's basically just a poncho.
Is that one owned by the church?
This was given to me from a retired pastor. He said, I have some chasubles and a coat. Do you want them? Because I'm not going to use them anymore. And I said, sure. And I just don't care for the style, so I haven't worn them or anything like that. But this is the idea behind it. The idea is that this is a shepherd's garment. Chasuble is the Latin word for means little house. And the ponchos or the little house are things if a shepherd was out in the fields fighting over their flocks by night and waiting for the angels to show up, you could kneel down like this and you'd be covered in. You have your own little tent right there with your head sticking out. And so the idea behind a pastor wearing this is, again, to exemplify or to emphasize the shepherding nature of the work that the pastor does. And that, in particular, in the Lord's Supper, to elevate or to accentuate the celebration of that event, to put more adornment on the specialness of the event, we add a vestment for that. Chasubles can be worn through the whole service, or sometimes they can be put on just before the communion liturgy begins. There's a variety of ways to do that. There's not a fixed way of saying that's when you have to do it. Some guys will say this is the way you have to do it, but they're wrong because I can give as many examples of other people who say other things, so it doesn't matter. So this is an example of a chasuble. And then that's more of I think that's prettier. You like this one? All right. Oh, all right. Maybe I'll pull it out for Pentecost. I don't know. And part of why I'm teaching this and showing you guys these things is because I didn't want to just show up wearing something and nobody know what it meant. That would be disruptive. It would not be fair to you or to anybody else. That's not how we do things. That's just not appropriate. So, in fact, me wearing a chasuble in this photograph was the beginning of this congregation wearing chasubles for our worship services. They had been preparing for it for a while, and my ordination was a good opportunity to say, all right, this is what we're going to do now. So that belonged to the church. So that's James Kaltoff. He was the Missouri District President at the time. He did my ordination. This is Bill Weinrich. He's one of my professors. He preached at my ordination. This is Peter Lang. He was my vicarage supervisor in Topeka, Kansas. He's first vice president of Synod now. And then Roger Getz and Glenn Bitter were pastors at St. John's in Topeka, where I did my vicarage, so they came over. This was in Kansas City, so we were like a stone's throw away from Topeka. We had a ton of people from my vicarage congregation and this congregation. Terry Small was my senior pastor. Ryan Went was a classmate of mine from seminary. We studied group together. He was from Kansas City. And then this is Greg Reeser. He was in the circuit that I was joining. So that's the crew. All pretty good vestments. All pretty nice. I'm happy with these. So, yeah, Joe, you have a question?
What would you say to people that are like, oh, I'm just going to wear my jeans and my shirt, or I'm just going to wear a suit? Would you say you should be wearing a vestment, or would you say wear whatever you want? What would you say to them? I
would say wear whatever you want, but realize what you wear says something. And is that what you really want to be saying? Like, I don't wear a suit and tie when I come to conduct the liturgy because I'm not here to do business. I'm not here to be a banker. I'm here to be your pastor. I'm not here to give a TED talk or an emotional, motivational speech. I'm here to deliver the Word of God and His sacraments, not point to myself and how snazzy my tie might be or how skinny my jeans might be. Those things all tend to draw attention to the individual versus away from. And so it is one of those things where, yes, we are free, but does that mean we have complete license? No, we really don't. And so we need to realize that what we wear and how we act says something about what it is that we're doing. If you're invited to meet the Queen of England, or there was a whole thing a little while ago, sports college volleyball team or something was invited, or softball team was invited to the White House because they won the championship, and some of the girls wore flip-flops. And I mean, they're like sandally, sort of open-toed things. I mean, it wasn't out of style, but was it appropriate to go to the White House? And I think there's sort of a thing there where you're sort of like, yeah, do we turn it up a notch or something? Can you wear whatever you want? You can, but remember, what you wear says something at the same time. So we just want to be mindful of that. So.
When we were growing up, we always said we saved our best for Sunday.
Well, yeah, we have our Sunday best, right? And that was part of, we come to church wearing our Sunday morning going to meeting clothes. Because, you wanted to put your best foot forward to come into the presence of God and receive his gifts. And that's fair. That's a fair way to look at that. Some other vestments that are less familiar would be a cope. Now, I actually do wear a cope when it's cold outside and I have to go out to the cemetery. I have a very nice, that the church purchased.
Cope or a cape?
It's just a cape.
It looks like it'd be warm.
And I can put it right over the top of my vestments. And so I can just go right out there and I'm still vested and I can conduct the service. I can do what I need to do, but I'm not cold. And I know I've been at some services with some of you and I've seen that you were cold and I've come over to you. I've wrapped you up because I could tell it was cold. I'm not so cold. I'm doing fine. I can spend all day out there. I'm preaching another sermon out there. You guys are like, so this is a cope. It's just a cloak or a cape or hooded garment.
Is it made of wood? Wool?
This is wool, yeah. This is a wool one. Yeah, it's nice and cozy. But if you're inside and you're just being festive and like the chasuble just accentuates the communion service, you could wear for non-communion services a festive coat for a non-communion event. This is one that we did get from that gentleman that is kind of really something. So gold can be used for Christmas, Easter, or red events. So it's like a chasuble, but it's open in the front, and this is a stylized hood in the back. And it just, for a non-communion service that you want to turn up the notch, like 5 or 6 notches, like a wedding, or like I think of like the first part of the Easter Vigil, or Christmas Eve, that kind of things. This would be one of those ways to turn it up and to say, wow, this is a really special service. And that's what the colors on the altar, the vestments that are worn and things, really, you walk in and you see, oh, there's red on the altar. It's either a Martyr's Day, it's Reformation, or it's Pentecost. You see white on the altar, but it's out of place. It's like not the right time of year. It's like, oh, something different's happening today. Or you see the pastor wearing something different like this. You're saying something special is going on. What's the deal? And we should be telling you what it is too. We shouldn't just do it for the heck of it. We should tell you why this is happening as well. So it's just a way to adorn and just to elevate the beauty and the glory of that particular event by what we wear and by the appointments that we set apart.
Would that be something that you might wear for a service where you have a processional cross?
Yep.
Yeah.
Bring the Bible down
Yep.
into the...
Yep, processions, ordinations, wedding, yeah, any sort of elevated service, and even like if we did a chasuble in the second half of the service, you could wear this during the first half of the service, that kind of stuff. So that'd be an option. The mitre, you ever see bishops wear the pointy hat and things? That's just a stylized descendant of a turban, or what the Old Testament priests, Aaron had a headdress. and things like a crown, and that's sort of what the mitre is supposed to be as well, the triangular hat. It's not common you see in the Lutheran Church. Some of the African Lutheran churches who have a bishop structure, they do wear a mitre and a cope for their various events and things. And they also carry what's called a crozier, which is a fancy shepherd's crook. Thing like that, just to show, again, this is the shepherd's office. The shepherd's office. And then the last ones there, the dalmatic and the tunicle, are like chasubles, but they would be for those ordained, or not even ordained, those assisting in a divine service that you've already sort of turned up the festivalness of. You want them to wear something special too. They would wear something that would match the chasuble, but instead of it being open like a poncho, it would actually be like a jacket. It would be closed with sleeves. And they're both sort of the same. So if you have the celebrant, who's the main pastor, who's got the chasuble on, and then maybe you have a deacon and a subdeacon who are helping out with other aspects of things, they might wear the dalmatic and the tunicle. Be sort of, so you got the main pastor, you got the deacon, you got the subdeacon, and they have places. I can get you all the details of where they're supposed to stand and how they're supposed to move and all this kind of stuff. We have all those sorts of things, but those things don't matter. So here are some examples of matched sets of things, maybe some good examples of some vestments that are nice to look at. So this is a whole match set that includes the altar frontals, and then you see this little sort of tabernacle in the center there. What do you think's underneath there?
The cup.
The chalice. The chalice is under there. That's what's known as a vested chalice. This would be before communion. You might vest it with that matching colored drape there, because it looks like the tabernacle. We're talking about the presence of God in that place, and it's just a way to dress that up. If you ever watch how I have the elders set it up, and then afterwards, even just the white drape that we put over ours, I do sort of spread it out like that, so it does sort of nice fitting like that. So there's a dalmatic. Oh, it would match this chasuble, but it's got sleeves. It's closed. The red one.
Nice looking red.
Yeah, these are really pretty. Even the albs can be sort of dressed up a little bit. This one has lace on the sleeves and along the bottom that has a chi rho in it. The R and the X with the alpha and the omega is sort of a lace around there. You can even dress that up a little bit. That's it. So yeah, there's sort of an overview of some of the things we can wear. With the cassock and surplice, if you were at like a preaching service, like during the midweek, and there would be like matins or something like that, it wasn't like a communion service or a Sunday service, you could wear what's called a tippet or a preaching stole, which would just be a black scarf and things. This is my great-grandfather's tippet from when he was a military chaplain. So that's kind of neat. And then I have my own. Oh, yeah, that's it. So I have my own. It's just plain black. But it's a little bit fluffier around the neck and stuff. So, but that would just be like for a preaching service. Not black for Good Friday, but just black because you wear a black cassock with a black coat and stuff like that. So there's that. So, all right. Next week we'll look at some of the things that go on the altar and some of the, maybe even the vessels and the metalware and some of those things. Bronco, you got a question?
Yeah, I noticed on all the stoves, they all have different designs. Does
Yeah.
that represent something?
Yeah, the designs on the stoles are one of those things that, we have freedom to pick and choose ways that we want to decorate them, just to be artistic about them. So this one is the lamb with the victorious cross, and then the cross with a crown. And all my skulls on the one side have the IHS with the cross, and the gold one has the crown on it because Easter and just necklace. I put a crown on top of it. So, and then the other side, I usually have another symbol or something related to the season. So, just decoration. And that's just varieties of ways that symbolism can be used in stained glass, in banners, and in vestments.
So you got to pick your own design?
Yeah. Yep. And usually it's related to the season that those would be appointed for. Like our Advent ones have Advent-related symbols, and our Lenten ones have Lenten-related symbols, things like that. Yeah, good question.
And
All right.
at the seminary, the wives have an option to take ecclesiastical embroidery class.
Yeah.
And make stoles.
Yeah, they offer a ecclesiastical embroidery for how to do the sewing of the stole and how you do the appliques and things like that. And then the goal is to make a red stole for your husband's ordination. It's kind of cool. And a lot of guys have done that. So it's kind of neat. All right, we'll pick up next week. I got to get dressed. And now you know what I'll be wearing.
It was Vaughn, she was talking about making